Yes?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
how's it going?
Good. I'm
Yeah,
awake.
it's been a minute.
It has.
Have you had coffee today?
I had so much coffee, Jeff. I shouldn't have any more coffee or we're going to hit like grad school level of I can see the threads of time and space.
I left my coffee in the car.
Oh no. I sense a pun coming.
No,
you
not
just-
yet.
Oh, okay.
There would be a pun if I had more caffeine in my system, but I also
But
fear
it needs
that
some time to percolate.
there you go. You're listening to A Little Too Quiet. It's the Ferndale Library podcast, and it's brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. My name is Jeff. I'm joined, as I usually always am, by Mary Grahame.
Hello. I was gone, but
You're
now I'm back.
Mary Grahame, you've been gone for like 6 episodes.
I know. Oh man, it was weird.
I know.
It was weird. I was away for normal personal reasons.
No,
and
yeah, of course.
I am returned.
Yeah. But yeah, here we are. You're back.
Yes.
And you're sleepy. I'm kind of sleepy.
We're still going to have a great time, though. We always do.
We are. But it's also 13 degrees outside, so
We're chilling.
I'm sure my coffee is just a block of ice right now.
I did run and get groceries on my lunch break, and I didn't even bring them in to put in the fridge because I don't need to.
Yep, same. Yep. Yeah, they're nice. They're crisp out there. Everything's crisp.
Yep.
So we have had a pretty good year. Oh my gosh. So actually the first order of business is to catch up because we had just previously released an episode in which staff offered their favorite books.
Yeah, I missed
of the
favorite
year.
books of the year. And of course, now I don't have my list with me.
Oh no. And
So I didn't read a single book at all this year, Jeff, because my list is not in front of me.
oh no, of course, because that's how our brains work.
Yep.
It's not even a trope. It's a real fact that when a librarian is asked, so what have you been reading lately? Your brain
I've never read anything in my life.
it's gone, despite the fact that you likely read 30 plus books that year.
I'm around 50 right now, which is low for me.
Okay.
I
Wow.
am normally around 75. But while I was out for 6 weeks, I finished exactly one book.
Okay.
So, and I it's been a year where I've read a lot of fan fiction. It's what my brain has needed, but I don't record fan fiction the way I record traditionally published books.
Okay.
So it looks like I read nothing in the month of April, but that's not true.
Oh, okay.
I was just reading about my good friend Steve Rogers.
Sure, but that's under your own sort of somewhat strict formula where
Yes.
you're not. Okay. But like, shout out that fan fiction. It was probably
Yes.
good, right?
Thank you, everybody who has been in the Stucky trenches for the last decade. I'm 10 years late to the party, but I'm having a great time.
All right.
And that's actually led me to a lot of, I enjoy, as you know, Jeff, reading a lot of historical fiction. And then after I have read the historical fiction, I say, well, I need to know more about that. And so I go do nonfiction research. So I picked up some I am not someone who's the kind of the stereotypical your dad who always wants to read a book about World War II. Normally I'm like, I will read any history book unless it's about World War II.
Sure.
But this year I've done some World War II reading and I'm like, well, there's some interesting stuff out there. We have a Studs Terkel book here that's the quote unquote good war. It's an oral history of World War II.
I've read it.
Everyone listening to this podcast, I can't recommend it enough. It's a marvelous book.
Sure. We should catch folks up if you are not aware, but longtime listeners might know Mary Grahame develops the nonfiction collection for the youth department.
I do, and I also have a
Are a nonfiction fan.
great big soft spot for the adult department for the nonfiction for the me.
Yeah.
So
At the World War II, and this is probably true still today, but I've worked in this library a long time, and there's kind of a joke out there. If you follow libraries enough on social media, that is like, oh, James Patterson, he takes up like 30 shelves of the library. In the nonfiction section, you get to World War II, which, oh no, it's not 940, is it?
it is.
Okay, it's 940.
Even if it's about Americans in World War II.
It just spans and spans and
Yeah.
spans and spans. There's so much
U90s are a European number.
on World War II.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, you were saying.
Yeah. Like I'm trying to think about, I can think of like broad categories of things I've read this year.
Wow.
But no,
It's
of
such a
course,
mystery.
Titles. The thing, listener, is that my list is at my desk. I could leave this recording studio.
Sure.
And retrieve my list and come back. Jeff, can I retrieve my list and come back?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
That's painful.
It was going to be fun to see you try, though.
I've returned with the list, but Jeff has momentarily left me alone in the studio, which feels like a great act of trust, but also, oh, the mayhem I could get up to when he's not here. Now he's back. Mayhem canceled.
Great. Okay, so we are back. We have a list.
Yeah, we're back because I couldn't bear it. Huge shout out to a Lunar New Year love story. Was my favorite graphic novel I read this year.
Delightful. I've only heard good things.
And I did indeed read it around Lunar New Year this year. But February. But you should read it.
What did you like about it? Or
Whenever
what do you remember about it?
Well, it's Jean Luen Yang, who is one of my favorite graphic novel writers. And it is indeed a very endearing YA love story. But the art is gorgeous. He didn't do the art. And of course, now I'm blanking on the artist who did. I'm very sorry about that.
It'll be in the show notes.
One of my favorite things about his work is he incorporates sort of culturally relevant church life in a way that I see in a lot of books about Jewish protagonists or Muslim protagonists, sort of culturally relevant synagogue life or mosque life. But a lot of the time is this weird thing about Christian hegemony is like everyone's kind of default assumed to be Christian, but nobody goes to church. Well, the people in Yang's, stories all go to church because he's a Chinese Catholic. And often incorporates that, although the protagonist of Lunar New Year love story is Vietnamese. So that was just fun for me. But there's a lot of information about lion dancing in it. So I enjoyed learning all of that.
Lion dancing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the Kung Fu schools where one learns.
Lion dancing.
Lion.
Not lion dancing,
yes.
folks.
Let's see.
We don't have a Foley artist on staff. That's actual pages.
It is probably... My book of the year was probably Dayspring by Anthony Oliveira, which folks have heard me mention before. Big shout out, favorite romance novel of the year was Ne'er Duke Well by Alexandra Vasti, which was her first traditionally published book. She has a couple of self-published ones and that I need to go back and read now. I read the Hunger Games trilogy for the first time, which was I get reduced to like just making noises.
Lived up to the hype?
It did. It really did. And
what do people love about that? What is it? What did you love about it?
Well, the thing that I loved about it as an adult is I found it to be a very realistic. Suzanne Collins knows exactly what she's doing. She knows exactly what sort of political science concepts are going to inform her story. The Hunger Games is very much a trilogy about just war theory and just war argument and the problems not only of extreme right authoritarianism but extreme left authoritarianism, and not in a like, oh, both sides are equally bad kind of way, but in a like, both sides have different but equally severe problems and neither of them are good.
Sure.
And there's a lot of, as somebody who knows enough about ancient Rome to be dangerous, there are a lot of parallels about, she basically, did a lot of research about ancient Rome and was like, what would that look like if we put it in North America in the medium-ish future? And I think the concept, the thing is, I think it's a concept that plays out perfectly. The third book is my favorite. People who hate the third book, I'm confused.
Oh, Mockingjay.
Mockingjay, yeah. So yeah, those were my big ones of the year, I think.
Yes. President Snow.
Yeah.
PETA.
Yeah.
Listeners, she did just smile.
I did. I love PETA.
Uh-huh.
And the book is not, the interesting thing is, so now I've seen the first 2.5 movies, I think. The books are not a love triangle at all. And Suzanne Collins has even mentioned, it's not about Katniss picking between two boys. She's picking between political ideologies.
Oh.
Like, Gale is very much a, like, might for right, thing. And it's the series also just hit close to home with some stuff going on in my personal life right now, which is the joy of sometimes putting off reading something until the stars align and some mysterious force whispers in your ear that you're ready to read it. Is that this series hit me a lot more powerfully than I think it would have if I was 13 and just kind of reading it because all my friends were reading it.
Okay.
And I didn't like dystopias, which is why I didn't read it when I was young.
I mean, a good lesson to, like, it's never too late to read a book.
It's never too late to read a book.
A big trendy
and it's
book.
also okay to not read a book even if it's really popular because you just don't think it sounds interesting to you.
You can also come back to it.
You can come back to it later.
And there's, like, I don't know. I don't believe in that thought of, like, oh, I've missed the chance for that book.
Neither do I.
Because I read, I mean, I know we just talked about Mockingjay. I'm not making any puns here, but I read To Kill a Mockingbird at like 25 or 26.
Yeah. My mom read To Kill a Mockingbird in her 40s.
I was like, where has this been all my life?
And my mother was stunned that she had somehow escaped reading To Kill a Mockingbird in the public school system of South Carolina. She felt like it should have been on her curriculum, but she didn't read it till she was in her 40s, and she was just blown away by, I think that she understood in a way that those of us who like that book but get taught it in, say, 9th grade English like I was, it takes us maybe longer to understand. I don't think To Kill a Mockingbird should be the quote-unquote racism book that gets taught on the curriculum. Like, I think you need a black writer if you want to talk about anti-black racism through literature. Go read some Zora Neale Hurston instead. But as a coming-of-age book about being a young white girl in a particular historical moment in the Deep South, it's a gorgeous novel.
Absolutely.
And a realistic one.
Right.
And my mother did not grow up in that part of the South and not quite in that part of history, but she just found the prose breathtaking. And that's something that can be, when you're a more experienced reader, pleasant. I mean, I used to have people tell me, like, oh, the writing style of the Hunger Games isn't impressive. It actually, I think it is. It's not flowery, but that's because Katniss hates everything and everyone, and she's right. I was really quite impressed by those books.
And similarly, A Hunger Games gets a lot of attention. People talk about it a lot. There's a movie about it, similar to Mockingbird, Kill a Mockingbird. You could easily think, oh, I mean, I saw the movie and
you gotta read the books.
Exactly.
Well, and I mean, the thing that I was impressed particularly with the first Hunger Games film is because the books are from Katniss's first person perspective, you never get anything outside of her. And the films do actually get to do interesting things in what can we tell the audience that Katniss doesn't know about in a way that you never get in the book, because we only know what Katniss knows as she knows it.
Oh, yeah.
So that was probably my big, like, reading event of the year, was finally reading The Hunger Games. Okay. And as the listener can tell by how long we've been talking about it, like, it's hilarious that this did not occur to me when you asked me, what did I read this year?
Go back to that book that had spring in the title.
Oh, Dayspring.
Dayspring.
Yes.
Tell us about that one a little more.
So Dayspring is by Anthony Oliveira, who is public intellectual and comics writer and now novelist, who I think he is based out of Canada at this point. And Dayspring is part novel in verse, part kind of poetical anthology, part time slip narrative.
Okay.
that asks the question, Jesus and the beloved disciple from the Gospel of John, kind of gay? Question mark?
Oh, okay.
And answers, yeah, pretty gay, actually.
Okay.
And in fact, sort of also asks the question, what if the person that you were in love with was the savior of the world, and then one day he went away, and then he came back, and then he went away again. Wouldn't that mess you up?
It would.
And this is a book about that. And it was also a book that felt like it was written specifically for me.
Wow.
Which is just wonderful.
Wow.
And I got it out of the library. I have since bought my own copy, but I got it out of the library through interlibrary loan. And this is something I love about being a librarian. You are not immune to the library magic that everybody else gets to experience. When people are like, they come in and they're like, do you have a book on such and such a topic? And you do, and you give it to them, and they're just delighted, and it blows their mind. Or they just pick up a book on a whim, and they're like, I'm going to read this. And it turns into their new favorite book. That happens to us, too.
Yeah.
And it is the best feeling.
Yes.
So.
What a concept.
That's
I have to
so good.
imagine that Jesus in a relationship is probably very much unintentionally avoidant. So, you can't blame him. He's got some other things going on.
Yeah, well, and I actually find it to be a much more compelling what if than the Da Vinci Code Mary Magdalene type of stuff. And I love Mary Magdalene.
Or Last Temptation of Christ.
Or Last Temptation of Christ. Which actually is one of my church friends. It is her favorite Jesus on film. Last Temptation of Christ, yeah.
Trip.
And so Anthony Oliveira also has a marvelous podcast called The Devil's Party, wherein he says we take the classics of Christian literature and we do the unthinkable. We read them. So he's done Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. This Dayspring is very much rooted in the Gospel according to John, the letters of John, the book of Revelation. So he's done some close reads of that. I think he's about to tackle the Gospel of Luke next, which is exciting. Dayspring, yeah.
Any other books on your mind before I go to a different subject?
Best YA I read this year was Imogen, Obviously, by Becky Albertalli.
Okay.
That's for all the bisexuals out there.
All right.
If you too were like myself, a young woman who was like, well, but I like men, so I won't look any further at that. And then later you were like, wait a minute.
So is it a romance or a coming of age?
It is a romance, and it's a coming out story, and it's also... It's a very, and this is what really endeared it to me in the same way that Red, White, and Royal Blue is very endearing to me, which also has a bisexual coming out storyline, is that there is often this fear that you don't count as queer or that you're making it up for attention, especially if you're a woman. So sort of some of the pushback or the prejudice that bi folks come up against is bi women are faking it for attention and bi men just don't exist. Bi men are all secretly gay. These, of course, are false things. But it's when you're surrounded by that, it can be very easy to just conveniently not ask yourself questions. And Imogen obviously came to fruition in part because Becky Albertalli came out as bisexual as an adult after quite a lot of online harassment about the fact that she, a woman that people assumed was straight, writes a lot of queer YA books. Now, we don't have time to unpack all of that. I'm deeply sorry that happened to her. I do thank her for taking such a terrible experience, and it's my favorite book of hers that she's put out so far. Right. And putting out such a great book in Imogen, obviously. And then I have one last World War II book, which is called Looking for the Good War. Okay. So you have Studs Terkel, The Good War, with good in scare quotes, and you have Looking for the Good War, which is by, I think her first name's Elizabeth something. It's a relatively recent book. She is a professor of history at West Point. History or literature. It might be literature. Wow. At West Point. And I think, and the subtitle has to do with America and cultural amnesia. And that, like, as soon as we got out of World War II, we started to tell a particular story about it.
Oh, yeah.
And again, as someone who's been thinking about Steve Rogers, my good friend Steve Rogers, since April. Right. I mean, talk about wouldn't that mess you up, you know? And I'm someone who's not familiar with the comics canon. I'm very much working off of a Marvel. They made Captain America the First Avenger, which was fine, and then they made to my mind, classic gay romantic comedy Captain America the Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah.
And then Marvel simply stopped making films after that.
Sure.
But man, what if you were a super soldier who sold war bonds and then went to Austria to go rescue your best friend who you're definitely in love with.
Right.
And then he died on a mission, and then you basically committed suicide by crashing a plane full of nuclear weapons into the Arctic, but then you woke up 70 years later. Wouldn't that mess you up?
Quite a bit.
And so...
you should, just for the fun of it, watch Civil War, because those vibes still continue.
I've seen Civil War, and I thought about rewatching it, and I put it in, and I watched the first scene, and I checked the runtime.
It's 2.5 hours.
And I thought, no,
Sure.
I can't do that to myself. I do vaguely remember it, but like, no, I'm not doing that. So...
Okay, so I'll tell you about a book I may or may not have read this year by an author named Gregory Maguire.
Did you read Wicked?
No,
for the
I didn't.
First time?
No, I didn't.
Here's the thing. I may actually, Wicked might be the first book I finished in the new year. I don't know. Because I didn't, here's the, God, we'll have to do a whole separate one called What Did Mary Grahame Watch in 2024?
Yeah, right.
But I'm a big fan, musicals, movie musicals, etc. Thrilled to see that there is about to be a new generation of fifth graders who pick up the novel and go, okay, okay, and come back to it as adults.
Sure.
So I am sitting here like, maybe it's time for me to actually go read Wicked, the novel from 1996 by Gregory Maguire. Which Maguire book did you read?
Oh, no, I was lying the entire time. I just
you were
wanted
lying
to
the entire time.
Provide
Cool.
you a nice segue so that you could talk about the film Wicked starring
starring Cynthia Erivo and
Ariana Grande.
First of all, I have to say, Miss Grande, my deepest apologies. I was not familiar with your game.
Sure.
When they announced, so the thing about Wicked is that the film has been in production hell for 15 years. When they finally announced it was happening, I was like, it's been too long. We just shouldn't touch it. It's probably cursed and it's probably not going to be good. And I saw that they had cast Ariana Grande and I like lost interest. And then a couple months ago, my coworker Damon, who of course works here, was like, oh, if you're judging that just because you only know her pop stuff, don't give the woman a shot.
Right.
And because I was not a Nickelodeon kid, so I did not grow up with her apparently being very funny on Victorious. And so the thing that actually got me to go see it in a theater was when I discovered Jonathan Bailey was in it. I will watch Jonathan Bailey in anything.
Jonathan Bailey.
Yes, of Bridgerton fame is probably where people know him from. And anyone who's listened to this pod probably knows about my deeply conflicting opinions about Bridgerton, but his season is the best one. But I also recently watched him and Matt Bomer in Fellow Travelers, which is a limited series on Showtime based on a book of the same name, and that is incredible. Oh my God, everybody go watch Fellow Travelers. Jonathan Bailey was robbed of that Emmy. But he also had 3 seasons at the Royal Shakespeare Company under his belt by the time he was 12.
Wow.
So when I found out he was in Wicked, I was like, okay, well, if nothing else, I have to go see this man dance. And that was the right thing to do. On
Ariana Grande's first album, she pays homage to Popular. She has a song that kind of samples
it turns out,
is a lifelong fan of
the
it.
enormous Wicked superfan who was like the on-set dramaturg.
It's adapted into a Broadway musical, I think around 04, 03, 04.
It premiered in 03.
03? And it's been running ever since.
Yes, it has.
With a variety of different guests. And now here we are with Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande.
And Cynthia Erivo is stunning.
And I don't know
in
if this tracks. I don't know. I've been working on it in my head. Of all the Alphabas, I think which is my favorite? Okay, we can go forward.
Can we, Jeff?
That was pretty good.
Can we?
one's thought of that yet.
As somebody who I think I saw Wicked around the time of its first tour, around 2005. And it was one of those, everybody has that piece of media that cradles their soul when they're like 12 years old.
Sure.
And when you grow up, it doesn't matter if that piece of media was good or not. Is Wicked good? Is not a relevant question, although it is, I will venture to say, better than something like Phantom of the Opera.
Okay.
Which is Phantom of the Opera good is also not a relevant question. Did I have fun is the relevant question.
It originally famously has Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel.
Yes.
Did you see those two, or you saw a
No,
different cast?
I think I saw Kendra Casabom as Glinda, who was she was the first tour Glinda, and I think ended up being a Broadway replacement. And she was marvelous. But I have always been a theater kid and who really enjoyed Wicked, and we did The Wizard of Oz when I was in 7th grade. So all of the weird little theater kids at, this little school, we were all listening to Wicked. And when I got into the theater for the movie, very quickly realized, when they made Lord of the Rings, you watch Lord of the Rings, I haven't even read all of those books and I haven't seen all the movies, but you watch Lord of the Rings and you're like, everybody who was involved with this production adored it, loved the source material, loved the craftsmanship, loved working on whatever their job was. Instantly got the same thing from Wicked. The actors are all singing live on set, and unlike in 2012 when Tom Hooper did Les Miserables and appeared to be embarrassed that he was directing a musical, and yet he keeps directing musicals, we did not hear anything other than how much they were singing on set. The problem with that is you need to cast singers. And so I'm actually not at all surprised Cynthia Erivo is doing The Wizard and I live on set, because she is that good.
Yes.
Even though she, you have to do however many takes. Everyone sounds amazing. Everyone looks amazing. I watched like a 20-minute video on Architecture Digest that's just the production designer talking about sets and how they built the sets and the logic behind what they did with the sets, and how
I saw that one set that Jonathan Bailey was sort of dancing around.
Yeah, the library set.
Man.
Yeah.
How much time did it take to build that one?
I don't know, but it's huge. It takes up like almost a whole soundstage, and all of those rotating bookshelves.
Yeah.
They are actually doing that.
Amazing.
And they were like,
and possibly dangerous.
They were like, the amount of money and insurance that we paid.
Sure.
There's a shot with one of the dancers that is, the dancer goes out of frame, but the shot doesn't end. He goes out of frame and comes back in, and he's doing a tumble. And they had 4 takes to get it right, because the choreographer was like, we can't let this man do this more than 4 times because it will stop being
hurt
safe.
Himself.
Yeah. And so anyway, that's all very granular, but like Wicked just makes my little musical theater loving heart happy, and my little 12-year-old self happy. And movie musicals can be a deeply mediocre experience. The amount of films from the 60s that are 3 hours of my life I'm never going to get back. But this is not one of those. This was 2.5 hours of my life very well spent.
Part one.
I was very skeptical about that. Because I believe that, Old Woman Yells at Cloud, Once Upon a Time, movie musicals were 3 hours with an intermission, and we called them The Sound of Music, and they became cultural icons. And they sold me, because it expands the world enough. That I actually do think that being able to have this big cinematic kind of fantasy space to play around in, especially considering that The Wizard of Oz, 1939, is a movie musical.
Sure.
I think the movie musical is maybe Wicked's final form. Like truest, I'm not a Pokemon player, but like the final Pokemon evolution.
You saw it in theaters?
I saw it in theaters twice.
Wow.
I am excited for it to come out on DVD. I hope they give me director commentaries and actor commentaries and a million behind the scenes videos.
I heard audiences really respond. I hear that there's like a truly powerful thing about defying gravity at the end.
I mean, yeah, it's a really great performance. Yeah.
There's just like a lot of oohs and ahs.
Yes. And it's just a really solid cast, really wonderful practical effects, gorgeous costuming. Like, this is what happens when you give people a budget and time. I love the movies. And also shout out to the other really fabulous movie I saw at the end of this year, Conclave, with Ralph Fiennes and Stanley Tucci. Oh,
absolutely. I just want to give any bonus points to any of the listeners who caught two of the puns that went under Mary Grahame's radar over the last 5 minutes. So Conclave.
See, now I'm worried about what I've missed, but not enough. Don't explain them to me.
Okay,
Let me leave me in my blissful ignorance. Yeah, Conclave, which is
selecting a pope.
About
fictionally.
Yes, about fictionally electing a pope. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things
Pope is a rock star.
About Conclave is how obsessed with its own premise it is, and especially with the fact that the premise is a thing that happens in real life. People just keep going around. So, okay, for those of you who don't know, Pope, Roman Catholic, Vicar of Christ on Earth, Bishop of Rome, etc. And the way the Pope is selected is when
a bunch of cardinals.
Normally, the Pope has to die.
Sure.
But except for one guy in the Middle Ages and Pope Benedict XVI, two of them have retired. But normally, the Pope dies. And technically, the only requirements to be a Pope are you have to be Roman Catholic and a man. But since a very long time, the next Pope gets elected from the College of Cardinals. And they are what is called sequestered, which is that they basically go into lockdown and they have no contact with the outside world, and it's secret ballot on paper, and it has to be a 2/3 majority at least for someone to be elected Pope, because you are praying for the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and the idea is that this election will somehow reflect the will of God. And
then people get into the Vatican and watch a chimney.
They watch a chimney because this part does kind of slap though.
Yeah.
Like, so because it's these secret paper ballots, after they're all counted, they are burned and the smoke is colored. So if it's black smoke, there's not a 2/3 majority. There is no Pope. If it's white smoke, there is at least a 2/3 majority. Habemus Papus, we have a Pope. And so people, and there are some nice moments in this film involving the smoke. But Conclave is obsessed with its own premise because it's a bunch of people who keep going around saying, isn't it insane that the Pope dies and we lock these guys in a building until they pick a new one? Yeah, my brother in Christ, it's nuts. I say this with interest and a small amount of affection, even though I'm a Protestant.
And in the film, they start to get a little catty.
Here's the thing. Many people online are comparing this film to Mean Girls.
At least John Lithgow gets catty. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. And while I do agree with the people who say it is the best use of a photocopier in the third act of a film since Mean Girls, that part's true. And Isabella Rossellini's role with that photocopier is incredible. This film understands the role that nuns play in the Roman Catholic Church writ large in a very understated but dead accurate way. And there's part of me when people are like, oh, it's Mean Girls, but with cardinals. As someone who is very involved in not the Roman Catholic Church, but a different denomination, and in church making bodies and elections, because Episcopalians love an election. We elect all our own bishops. It's Christians just be like that. It is a decision, there are the part that there were many parts of this film that actually moved me quite deeply. But there's a moment when Ralph Fiennes, who everyone keeps accusing of being very idealistic, at one point he tells basically his best friend, Stanley Tucci, I thought we were here to serve God, not the Curia. And Stanley Tucci, who's having a bad day, says, don't be naive. And, you know, because, there is this jockeying for what is the press going to say? What is the world going to think? And you do have Ralph Fiennes' character as kind of this voice of, this is why we've closed all the doors. We're not supposed to care.
Right.
And it is a reflection of some very real life tensions in the global Catholic Church at the moment. And also a case of the costumes look incredible. Apparently I was reading an interview with the costume designer, and they asked if anyone from the Vatican had gotten in touch with her about, compliments or anything. And she said, no, but I did hear from a Jesuit in Baltimore who wrote to me and said, God, I wish they looked that good.
Oh.
And it's funny, if you know anything about the Jesuits, it would be a Jesuit who would say that. Again, said with love and affection. Many of my best friends went to Jesuit school. But so as a church nerd, it's politics, as a politics nerd, there is, Aaron Sorkin was not involved in the making of this film, but there is a whiff of Aaron Sorkin sensibility about it, circa The West Wing. Garrulousness, but also, the power of a good person making a really good speech.
Oh, that.
I so desperately want to believe in the power of a good person making a really good speech, Jeff, so...
Aaron Sorkin certainly does love a perfect protagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone in this film is perfect. You also do need to go see it so you can see an Italian cardinal constantly taking a hit off of his vape at dramatically important moments.
Sure, of course.
Which is not at all a caricature.
Both films, Conclave and Wicked, nominated for a Golden Globe Best Picture, musical or comedy.
Were they? Okay.
So, yeah. Anything else on your mind, Mary Grahame, that we missed? Anything else that you watched or read that is currently in your brain?
That's mostly my year in review.
Okay.
I mean, fellow travelers,
Sure.
I should circle back to really like TVMA, like, caveat person watching thing. But fellow travelers, very much worth your time. And I am catching up on Bridgerton. I am catching up on season 3.
Season 3. Have they done a 4th yet?
They are in, I think, pre-production for the 4th. So season 3 actually dropped quite some time ago. I think it came out half in March and half in May.
Right.
The thing is that Colin Bridgerton deeply bores me.
Okay.
I actually read the first 3, so they're also doing it a little out of order because I think the first 3 Bridgerton books are Daphne, Anthony, Benedict, who I love, and then the 4th book is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which is Colin, and many people love that book. I was not one of them. I was bored halfway through, and so I stopped reading it. But I do enjoy Nicola Coughlan, who plays Penelope Featherington. Yes. And I was like, well, my brain wants romance novels right now, but also when I was catching up on the season, I didn't have the mental capacity to be reading, and I was like, I just want pretty people falling in love. And boy, did it deliver. And I also forgot how down bad I am for the trope of flirting lessons because the plot of this season is Colin is like, oh, Penelope, my old friend Penelope, I will help you find a husband. Surely it won't be me. And the face that Jeff is making is like, we all know how that ends. And so there are a couple of scenes where I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot I love that. So that's very fun. And next season is Benedict's season. I think Luke Thompson is a fine actor. I've been a fan of his stage work for years. So I am excited for that.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wahoo.
Good catch up.
Yes.
Good energy. It's good to have you back.
Review. Oh, God, it's good to be back.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing a year in review.
Yes.
So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I can also vouch for Conclave. Very, very entertaining.
I was riveted. I was.
Despite it being a movie about sequestration? Yes. Or whatever.
It's not even despite for me.
Yeah.
Put those guys in a room and don't let them out is actually one of my favorite kinds of story. That's why we all love like an Agatha Christie. Yeah, we love our 12 Angry Men. We love our Agatha Christie locked room mystery.
Yep.
Nobody can leave this train. Put that man in a situation and lock him in a room while he has to deal with that situation.
And the fun thing is that in a month or two or less, you could come check out those movies on Blu-ray or DVD here from the library.
And I do just want to let people know, because very often I will say, I really don't have any streaming services anymore. And I will say to people, oh, I'll get the DVD from work. And sometimes people say to me, they still make DVDs. Not only do they still make DVDs, or people will say, well, I don't have a DVD player. They are $30.
Right.
For much less than your weekly grocery bill.
Yep.
You too can acquire the equipment to watch, whether hooked up to your laptop or a television set, a DVD.
Yeah.
And then you can come to your library,
right,
where we pay for the DVDs,
right,
and you get to borrow them.
Right.
That is how I entertained myself for the 6 weeks I was not at work.
And then, of course, there's also Canopy. You could be out there thinking to yourself, oh.
That's another marvelous thing. I watched on Canopy Pygmalion from 1938 with Leslie Howard. Pygmalion is one of my favorite plays. This is a weird thing to say, but it is my favorite story about misogyny.
Yes.
And it's the source material for My Fair Lady.
That's right.
Yes. And it's by George Bernard Shaw. And he did the screenplay for the film, based on, I think he had written the play almost 25 years earlier. And it's absolutely marvelous. Highly recommend it. 90 minutes. Nice. See, here's the thing about another reason I won't watch Civil War, it being 2.5 hours. A movie should be 90 minutes or 3 hours with an intermission.
Okay.
That is one of my most recent hot takes.
Sure. Said the fan of the first Avenger with its runtime of 1 hour and 58 minutes. But okay, no, we're not quibbling here.
Okay, well, but it's not. It's not. Listen.
It's all good. It's all good.
I don't have to be consistent.
Nope. Nope. Yeah, and I mean,
yeah. So Pygmalion right there on Canopy. There's some great classic cinema.
Oh yeah.
There's also plenty of new stuff. The amount of times that I enjoy a film from the 30s and 40s. And so that is often what I'm going on and looking for when I am on Canopy. There is so much new stuff that I'm like, that's on Canopy, and I like add it to my list.
Right.
And I come back to that. So
and like Netflix used to be, they'll arrange everything by genre, or they'll sometimes have little curated batches.
Yes, they do.
It's easy to browse.
Yeah, I think they did like a noir month back in October.
Yep.
It's very good.
So if you don't know what you're looking for, they'll make it easy to browse.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't own The Bishop's Wife on DVD, but I'm going to watch it on Canopy tonight.
You're watching a documentary about my family, Jeff.
Oh. Wait, where an angel visited your...
No, no, but...
Your feuding parents?
No.
And magically decorated a tree?
No.
And then went fake ice skating?
My parents weren't feuding, but like the clergyman in The Bishop's Wife, we are Episcopalians. Yeah. And my father is clergy. And I was an only child who was a girl. So no, zero Cary Grants were involved in my childhood. But I do occasionally watch The Bishop's Wife, and I go, interesting. And people text me. Like, my friends who watch The Bishop's Wife around Christmas are like, what's up? I was thinking of you and your family because we're watching The Bishop's Wife. Yeah.
I usually just watch it and say, man, that man can wear a top coat.
He can wear a top. Cary Grant can wear a top coat. Yeah, I mostly watch it and say, that bishop, God, he's not even ignoring his family to like feed the poor. He's ignoring them to build a cathedral.
Right.
New York already has one. That's willing suspension of disbelief.
Sure.
But my parents and I always watch Muppet Christmas Carol on Christmas Day evening after dinner. Okay. But I now for several years have to watch the TV adaptation of Hogfather.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Hogfather is one of the Discworld novels by Terry Pratchett. I, at this point, now read usually 1 to 2 Discworld novels a year. 2 years ago, I read Hogfather and was like, oh, I think there's a TV adaptation. I think Michelle Dockery is in it at the very beginning of her career. She is. It's marvelous.
Excellent.
It's very faithful to the book. It's very fun. And so now I watch it every year.
Excellent. Yes. Wait, where was I going? I do love a Finnish film that it blends in a little bit of horror. It's called Rare Exports.
Okay.
Set during Christmas time.
I love A Christmas Carol, the actual novella. I love the Muppet version and any radio play type of adaptation.
I'm interested in it as an entity
Yes.
of what it had as like a cultural impact.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it basically re-kickstarted a popularity of Christmas.
Yes. And I think there should be more stories about supernatural entities bullying rich people into being better people.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, to bring it all back to Jonathan Bailey, that's where the quote "fellow travelers" comes from, though. Fellow travelers to the grave. Dickens.
Really?
Dickens wrote it.
I had forgotten, because for those who, I really haven't explained Fellow Travelers at all. It is, the series covers a larger amount of time than the novel it's based on. It covers the Lavender Scare in Washington, D.C. in the 1950s through the AIDS crisis in the late 80s. And fellow travelers was a term for people who were not communists but had communist sympathies.
Oh, interesting.
But I think fellow travelers to the grave also makes quite a bit of sense.
And also the source of one of the worst puns ever. There's more of gravy of you than grave. So
it's a classic. My particular favorite is I say not that there is anything particularly dead about a doornail. I should have thought a coffin nail to be the deadest piece of ironmongery. Yeah.
I liked when you could catch writers like Dickens and Poe catching themselves rambling.
Yes.
I probably shouldn't have talked about this for so long. Anyway.
Yeah, like I love a narrator that is not a character but in the story but is their own entity. Although if you're going to make them a character in the story, make them Gonzo and Rizzo.
Yep.
A la
Absolutely.
A Muppet Christmas Carol.
Absolutely.
So.
And if you really liked Muppet Christmas Carol, no. Well, let's wrap it up there. I guess we got to get back to work eventually, right?
Well,
Can't
it's almost the
podcast
end of the
forever.
work day.
Oh, yeah.
Jeff.
That's good. All right.
So what do we have coming up here at the library?
Oh, gosh. Coming up in the immediate future? Well, we're going to have a pretty chill end of the year, as we should. But we do have some fun things coming around. We've got a Crafter Noon event coming up.
Excellent.
In the youth program soon.
Yes.
A Mario Kart Grand Prix.
Sure do.
Reading Rainbow Book Club is going to be back in action in January.
Yeah, we took December off because of how our
Cardboard
closures
Kingdom?
fall.
Cardboard Kingdom?
Cardboard Kingdom.
Yeah.
Graphic novel.
Yeah.
We did it for Battle a couple of years ago.
Sell is the author. I can't remember
Yeah,
the first
Chad
name.
Sell.
Yeah.
Marvelous. Rainbow Club over at
The middle school.
Fresno Middle School. Just had that meeting. We'll keep meeting through the end of the school year.
Pokemon Terrariums.
Yep. People are excited about that.
For the adults, we have air plant hangers, and we have gratitude journals, and we have intention-infused bath bombs, and we have who knows what else.
Come on down, folks.
Yeah.
Come on down.
Come on down. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to another episode of A Little Too Quiet. It's the Ferndale Library Podcast, and it's brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. There I go. I got it all. It's Mary Grahame, thoughts?
Well, speaking of the Friends of the Ferndale Library,
Yeah.
for any last minute gifting needs, for folks who celebrate various gift giving holidays. And also, fun fact, when Shakespeare was alive, New Year's was the traditional day for gifts.
Oh, yeah.
So even if you celebrate no winter holidays, you could still use New Year's as an excuse to give your loved ones treats.
Sure.
We have a Friends bookstore. There are neat things in that Friends bookstore.
Oh, yeah.
Not just books,
Yeah.
although there are books. There are t-shirts. There will be other goodies,
There will soon be pins and candles.
which are perfect things to give as little treats to
Oh, yeah.
people you appreciate.
Yeah.
So, that's all I had to say. Brought
Sure.
to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Come buy swag from them to support the library.
support the friends, and you support the library, and you support this podcast, and you'll also find more information at ferndalefriends.org. Of course, thanks to John Duffy for giving us the music for this podcast. Wait, if I didn't say it yet, thank you for listening. You could also leave a review of this podcast. That would help us out, help us find more listeners. Mary Grahame, welcome back again.
Delighted to be back, Jeff.
And we'll be back soon with more, everybody. I mean, it's late December when this drops. So, Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.